Bună seara, bun găsit, doamnelor și domnilor, la o ediție specială Tema Zilei, în direct de la Palatul Parlamentului, cu un invitat foarte special. Este considerat una dintre cele mai strălucite minți ale lumii, cel mai bun jucător de șah al tuturor timpurilor, dar în același timp un curajos apărător și promotor al drepturilor omului peste tot în lume, un spirit liberal și lucid și, nu în ultimul rând, unul dintre cei mai înverșunați adversari ai lui Vladimir Putin. Garry Kasparov este la București, unde participă la prima etapă a turneului Grand Chess Tour, la care sunt prezenți 10 dintre cei mai buni jucători de șah ai lumii și ne-a făcut onoarea să fie alături de noi în această seară. Mr. Kasparov, good evening. Welcome to Bucharest and thank you for being with us tonight. You've been here last year, and it was really hard to believe for people then that will be experiencing a war so close to us in Ukraine. You are one of the very few people that made this dark and unfortunate prophecy, and unfortunately very few other politicians, ordinary people, believed you. What are your feelings today about that?
I don't feel like celebrating my prescience. It's very sad. I wish I were wrong. But what makes me feel really sad and even angry is that everything I said was based on the signs, like big signs on the wall. We have been dealing with a KGB agent who said many times that there were no former KGB agents, who lamented numerous times the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. We dealt with Vladimir Putin, who bluntly told 15 years ago in 2007 in Munich at Security Conference in Europe, that it was time to return to spheres of influence. People in Romania, in Eastern Europe, they know the language. This is directly from Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the language used by Hitler and Stalin to divide Europe. And the result of this deal between fascists and communists in 1939 was, in this country, was a loss of territories that many people still remember so vividly. And Vladimir Putin made no secrets about his plans. And every time that he put his demands on the table and acted, like attacking the Republic of Georgia in 2008 or annexing Crimea in 2014, he met with no response. Even after annexation of Crimea, first annexation in Europe since World War II, the free world, Europe and America, they responded with, they called sanctions, but actually it was like a mosquito bite. Putin was laughing at them. So I knew that for Putin, next stage of attacking Ukraine would be when, not if. Why I knew it? Because he kept saying that. Russian propaganda. Every day, 24 hours, they just kept repeating that Ukraine was not a real state. It had to be destroyed, split in parts. And Putin always wanted to liquidate Ukrainian statehood. And when Putin brought 200,000 troops surrounding Ukraine from north, east and south, when he brought his Pacific fleet from Vladivostok to Black Sea, I knew it would be a matter of time before he attacks. And again, the free world turned a blind eye. I understand that people, as you said, nobody wanted to believe it. Because, wow, my God, we live in 21st century, it's 2022, this is not 1942. But the problem is that the dictators, they don't change. There's no big difference between Hitler, Stalin, Putin. We can mention Ceausescu. So again, we know dictators never ask why. It's always why not. And Putin saw that he could grab territories. He could kill people in Syria, carpet bombing Aleppo. He had so many crimes with no consequences. That's why his attack on Ukraine, for him, was just another step. And if not for heroic resistance of Ukrainians, if not for great leadership of President Volodymyr Zelensky, I'm afraid we will be now seeing another capitulation of the free world and negotiation about saving parts of Ukraine. But thanks God, Ukrainians survived the first onslaught. Zelensky proved to be an outstanding leader, and Russian army failed to take over Kiev and most of Ukraine. And now we see the unification of the free world, and I think it's a historical moment, because I believe the victory of Ukraine in this war could end centuries of Russian imperial expansion, and hopefully will lead to the collapse of the last empire in the world, and with liberation not only of Ukrainian lands, but also with all other territories that have been illegally acquired by Russia and Russian Empire and Soviet Union.
I want to share something with you. I've seen Vladimir Putin in 2008 here in Bucharest at the NATO summit, right here in this hall that we are making this interview. On this very stage, he held a press conference and talked about Ukraine's and Georgia's aspiration to join NATO. I remember that when he entered, his journalists just stood up and clapped for him, and he was very aggressive and just warned NATO not to agree to Ukraine and Georgia's membership. Do you think that could have go differently? It would be a different situation if the political decision back then in 2008 would have been different?
Absolutely. If Ukraine was admitted to NATO in 2008, there would be no war that we are seeing now. If in 2014, 50% of the sanctions that are imposed now, maybe 25% of sanctions, had been imposed on Russia, maybe Putin would recognize that there would be a cost. If during 8 years after annexation of Crimea and war in eastern Ukraine started by Putin, until his latest aggression in February this year, if Ukraine had been armed, if Ukraine received full support from the free world, again, good chance Putin would not cross the red line. But he believed he could go unpunished again. And I think it's time for many world leaders, like Barack Obama, Angela Merkel, to actually speak out. I want to hear from Angela Merkel. She was in Germany, the Chancellor of Germany, actually the leader of Europe, and she did absolutely everything to put Europe on the hook of Russian gas. She is directly responsible for Putin's aggressive policies because she prevented Europe from finding alternative pipelines. We see now it's not that difficult. It takes maybe 6 months for oil, maybe a few years for gas, 16 years. If she were quoted a Russian agent, of course she was not, what else she could do to help Putin? It's a result of, some say naivete. I would say, it's a cold business interest with total, contempt for political realities. How many times Angela Merkel and her administration talked about, pipelines, Nord Stream 2, it's business. Let's separate from politics. You can separate it, but Putin doesn't, and he never did. And Germany played a crucial role in paralyzing Europe in the wake of Putin's aggression. And all the outcries from Eastern Europe, from Poland, from Romania, from Baltic states, they were just, they were not heeded, ignored. And the United States, 8 years of Barack Obama, the years from 2009 actually, January, to early 2015, those are the years where Putin left office officially, always stayed behind his puppet Medvedev, and then came back. And when he attacked Syria and annexed Crimea, response from America? Flexibility. Barack Obama was laughing at Mitt Romney at the presidential debates in 2012, when Mitt Romney correctly said that Russia was geopolitical foe number one. And Obama responds, you live in the past. It's not a Cold War. Check your calendar. It's not 1980s. Yeah, it's not 1980s. It was a new, much more dangerous, more aggressive empire, because Putin recognized that he could buy his way through. So many Western politicians and business people and luminaries were willing to live on Putin's cash, starting with Gerhard Schroeder, and the list will be so long. So many former prime ministers, foreign ministers, captains of business, and prominent individuals were willing to embrace Putin, and again, ignoring the fact that he was a war criminal from the very beginning. Again, I want to hear from Angela Merkel. She has to go to Kyiv to apologize. I want to hear from Barack Obama, who is around but pretends that he had nothing to do with what's happened. And many politicians in Europe. So still, they are short of recognizing their guilt in making Putin who he is today. For those who are, surprised, war crimes in Ukraine. Yes, it's massive scale. What about Aleppo? Carpet bombing Aleppo? What about using chemical weapons in Syria? What about Grozny back in 2000? What about killing political opponents? Again, we all know what KGB is. I'm in Romania. I'm not in France, not in Great Britain. But we are now seeing the threat that is being recognized. And I think it's a historical moment where the history of the 21st century will be changed. But Ukrainians are paying enormous price in blood.
You call the sanctions of the Crimea a mosquito bite.
Yes.
What about the decisions made now after the invasion of Ukraine? Is that enough? Can Europe, can the West do more?
Oh, you can always do more. That is, speaking about sanctions after the invasion, by the way, these sanctions, part of these sanctions, could be actually introduced before the invasion. I said many times, I wrote many articles saying sanctions cannot stop tanks from rolling. Sanctions cannot stop planes from dropping bombs, but they can prevent them from doing so. Sanctions must have preventive character. So we see today that European Union now is debating the sixth package. Sixth package. So it's all in stages. Now the question is, if you have the sixth package now debating, that is very, very painful, talking about Russian oil and gas. So you had already 6 steps. Why none of the steps were made before? As for 2014, its mosquito bite is a very polite description. It was a joke. Because they all knew how to go around the sanctions. And if you want to see the effect of the sanctions, you simply look at the amount of gas that Europe and Germany primarily has been buying since 2014. From 2014 to 2021, Germany has doubled the amount of Russian gas it had been buying. As we know now, some European countries, including France and Germany, had been even selling military equipment to Russia. So it was a lip service. And that's exactly what Putin thought. That's why he got so arrogant. Now, what's the difference? 3-4 days, I'm in Kyiv, I'll take over Kyiv, I'll put my puppet, Yanukovych, whoever, we brought him in the tanks, as they did in 1979 in Afghanistan, and then everybody will go back to the negotiating table. Putin made correct calculation based on his previous experience. The one thing that he underestimated, as every dictator before him, the will of free people. The fact that Ukrainians will fight back. And Ukrainians were lucky having a great war leader. It's a very strange time. We have so many politicians turned to be clowns. And a comedian has become a hero. And it's another lesson of history. So many times dictators, pushed and pushed. and then eventually cross the last red line. And that's why, from day one of this war, I've been saying that there's only one result that can be accepted by people in the free world. Ukraine must win. Ukraine must be liberated. And the liberation of Ukraine, the whole country, Crimea included, it's the precondition of the collapse of dictatorship in Russia. So the free world, answering your question directly, is doing much better now. We could see that every day makes changes. Why? Because public demands it. Because Chancellor Scholz, who had never thought about being a war leader, I think it's for him it would be a nightmare. If somebody told him 3 months ago that he would be sending tanks to Ukraine, he would be laughing at your face. They have to send tanks now because the public demands it. So the free world now is united. Same way as in 1940s, when the world united against fascism. Now we're facing fascism, but it's coming from the East. And we have Lend-Lease from America and Europe supporting the nation that is heroically fighting against fascism. And I believe that it's something that should help us to recognize that there are values that is worth fighting for and dying for. I think we lost our way somehow. And Ukrainian war is just it's a very painful, very bloody reminder. So what price we're paying for our complacency and forgetting the fact that evil doesn't die. It can be buried under the rubble of Berlin Wall for a while. But the moment we lose our vigilance, it sprouts out.
But you spoke about the public demanding the European leaders to act. But still, Viktor Orban just won the elections in Hungary with flying colors. Marine Le Pen went into final in the presidential elections in France, not a dictatorship. So how do you explain the fact that there are still people that vote for politicians that so transparently are friends or supporters of Vladimir Putin?
There are a number of reasons. As for Viktor Orban, naturally there are certain factors that we are not aware of. There are many rumors now, flying rumors about compromat that Putin had on him. I don't know. I'm just simply repeating the stories that are now available in the internet. But since we see Hungary, that remembers Soviet tanks in Budapest, being so pro-Russian in the war, that is demonstrating cruelty and atrocities that we have not seen in Europe for 80 years, there are reasons to suspect that there's more than just political calculations in Mr. Orban's actions. As for him winning the elections, look, I'm not an expert in Hungarian politics, but I believe he was very smart in speculating on the fear of the old fear of Hungary being engaged in the conflict, and the opposition proved to be incapable of finding the right approach. He is a skillful politician, as Adolf Hitler was, for instance. Or just, by the way, Putin was not, because Putin never had any free and fair elections. Though I wouldn't call Hungarian elections fair. It's free, but definitely not fair. As for France, it's a result of propaganda. For many years, for 2 decades, Putin's propaganda had been bombarding France, Germany, the whole world with their propaganda messages, and it does work. It's not just Marine Le Pen making 41% in the second ballot, in the second round. It's about 55% of French voters in the first round voting for Le Pen and 3 other openly pro-Putin candidates. So it gives you an indication. So how far this virus, infiltrated the immune system of free society. And again, it's time to wake up and to understand it's not just about Ukraine. Ukraine is on the front line of our battle against tyranny and dictatorship.
Getting to propaganda, it is even more fierce in Russia. And I know you live in exile now in the United States, but I still want to ask you, what do Russians want? The people, not the members of Putin's oligarchy. Because there were polls. Of course, their accuracy is very questionable, like everything that comes from Russia. But they show that Putin's approval rates are still high, that there is a majority that support the invasion of Ukraine, and some of them are even asking to extend it to other countries, Poland, like for that matter, or the Baltics. Is it just propaganda, or there's something there? How do Russians imagine the future of their country?
But let's start with what you said. So you cannot trust these polls. I don't think we can find out what majority of Russians thinking now, because if you're being called by a stranger and asked about the war and Putin, I bet you that 9 out of 10 Russians simply hang up. Because you can go to jail if you say you are against Putin, so you don't want to be in trouble. Yes, those who answer the questions, I'm not sure many of them are also honest. Do we have considerable chunk of Russian population supporting the war? Yes. Don't forget, in Germany in 1944, there were still people believing in Hitler. Even maybe in 1945. So and there were only 12 years of Dr. Goebbels propaganda, not 22 years as now.
But where is that? Is a reminiscence of the Soviet Union mentality?
Yeah, but let's not forget this. Putin came into power after tumultuous 90s. And oil prices went up. The life under Putin got better. Again, same Hitler effect. There was a crisis in 2008, but by the way, it was Putin left, Medvedev was there, and then everything came back. And then Putin got Crimea. I make parallels with Hitler again, Sudetenland, or Austria, Anschluss of Austria, bloodless. So Putin has been winning all the time. Now, if you want to understand, so the picture many Russians are seeing, I made myself big effort. I watched 2 times the 9 o'clock news in Russia. I can tell you, the picture you see there has nothing to do with reality. It's not about distorting facts. It's opposite. It's 180 degrees opposite. So the picture they see, it's Russian troops are fighting Nazis in Ukraine. They're saving Ukrainian civilians, and Ukrainians are bombing. It's all opposite. So I assume that for many people, it's still, a picture that they trust. But every day of the war is, I think, it's chirping pieces out of this, propaganda wall, because it's already 3rd month, and nearly, it's not, Russian troops are not nearly, close to finish what they call special military operation. By the way, you cannot say war now, it's a special military operation. If you say war, you can also go to jail. So, and I think that in the next few weeks, we could see quite a dramatic shift of public opinion in Russia, because sanctions now are about to begin biting. Sanctions, it takes time, but sanctions this time are really serious. And within the next few months, Russian economy could really collapse. And with Europe now showing spine, showing strength, banning Russian oil this year, and demonstrating its willingness to cut the supply of Russian gas in the foreseeable future, and cutting almost everything else. So I think it's going to change things. And also, there's a critical mass of losses. According to Ukrainian sources, confirmed by Western intelligence, more than 20,000 Russian soldiers have been killed. More than 20,000. So in Afghanistan, the total loss in 10 years was 15,000. So more than 20. So if you have 20,000 plus soldiers killed, so you can estimate that about 80,000, 4 to 1, wounded. So that's just, you're talking about losses of 100,000 plus already, and it's keep mounting. So with the body bags going back to Russia, I think we will see when this critical mass leads to explosion. Because in dictatorship, you don't know when is the moment where this critical mass reaches its peak and leads to explosion. Because you don't have, going back to the question, you don't have the legitimate ways of measuring the temperature of public discourse.
What about the Russian elites? I'm not talking about the oligarchs, but the elites in arts, in sports. You are one of the most loud and brave opposition voices to Vladimir Putin, but may I add, one of the very few. Of course, being Putin's enemy comes with great personal costs, sometimes even life, like Boris Nemtsov or Anna Politkovskaya. You live in exile. You yourself have been arrested a couple of times. Alexei Navalny is in jail. But still, there are great Russian personalities in art, in sports. Some of them don't even live in Russia or perform there, that support or just stay neutral. Anna Netrebko, the great soprano, cancelled her roles at Met Opera in New York rather than distancing herself from Putin.
I think she's trying to come back. I think she's now trying to find a way to muddle through. Look, I find this disgusting. You can talk about, famous Russians like Ovechkin. This is one of the leading NHL player in America. I think it's absolutely disgusting, and I think that the NHL, National Hockey League authorities, they have to take action because every Russian who is playing, every Russian athlete who is participating in any events in outside of Russia, in my view, must, it's kind of the oath, must, condemn the criminal war in Ukraine and atrocities there. So this is a precondition. I would say, anybody who doesn't do that should not be invited, should be kicked out from any exhibition, sport event, art, culture. It's a price to pay. Because, what we're seeing in Ukraine, it's just war crimes on an industrial scale. It's a genocide. And being silent is not enough. You have to condemn it publicly. There are more Russian personalities, the luminaries who have been leaving Russia lately. They are getting more vocal while they live in safety on the other side of this new Iron Curtain. But still, you're right. The number of people, the number of famous people who are openly blasting Putin regime for these crimes, it's still too low, and much more can be done. But again, it's a result of so many years of complacency. The free world pretended that it was not their business. We knew that many Russians, and say Ovechkin and Netrebko, they were openly supporting Putin, and nobody thought it was a reason, at least, to demand some kind of explanation. So they could combine their very lavishing contracts in the free world with, friendship with Putin that also brought, material benefits to them. So I think everybody has to be forced to make a choice. But the choice should be dictated by the free world. We're seeing more progress. We're hearing voices to make these demands. We know that many sports organizations in football, in tennis, they are making these decisions. And I think it's very important that as long as the war continues, as long as Putin stays in power and remains a threat to neighboring countries, and actually to the whole world because he has nuclear weapons, Russia must be isolated. Isolated financially, economically, politically, technologically, and also in art and sport. It's a price to pay. I'm saying it with uneasy heart because I'm one of the most decorated Russian and Soviet athletes. But I think the future of Russia, future of my country, depends on our ability to actually clear the name of the country. It cannot be done without strong condemnation, not only of Putin's crimes, but also all the crimes of Soviet Russian history that have to be dealt with if we want Russia to go back to the family of civilized nations.
There was much talk about the decision at Wimbledon tennis tour. Russian sports players from Belarus were not allowed to participate, and some of players from other countries, Simona Halep, for instance, from Romania, contested this decision, saying it's not fair because sport has nothing to do with war and politics, and tennis is an individual sport.
It's utter nonsense. So I had a Twitter debate with Djokovic, who actually also went against his decision, saying that they play Wimbledon by ranking, not by nationality. And I responded saying, but the Russians are killing Ukrainians not by ranking, but by nationality. So that's the, and I think it's a moral duty of all organizers to make sure that no Russian players can take part in official competitions unless they condemn the war. We have here Yan Nepomniachtchi playing. He was one of the Russian players who signed the petition against the war. Okay, and he's still in Russia. So he had courage to sign it. So I think it's for the refusal to take a position. It's for someone who is playing for Russia. It's absolutely unacceptable. And I suggest that all these prominent players, athletes, who are now talking about separation of sport and politics, they better shut up. And if they want to think again, look at Bucha, look at Kramatorsk. I think it's absolutely disgusting now to talk about sport when people are being killed. As we speak, they're being killed. The war it's not a glorious battle, between two armies. This is a demolition of the whole country. What Putin has been doing is he's trying to bombard Ukrainians into submission, deliberately attacking civilians. We're talking about now tens of thousands. I tell you, it's very bad news. There will be hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties. And I don't understand how we can ask Ukrainians or members of other nations that do not want to play with Russians under these conditions, how you can force them to play. No, it's a price for us to pay. Germans paid the price for decades for what they did. And Russians, we will be also paying the price. Even I feel certain amount of guilt when I talk to Ukrainian television, and I do it almost every day. I'm one of the only Russians who have been attacking Putin from day one in his office. My first article about Putin was in January 2001 in the Wall Street Journal. But even I feel that I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough to stop Russia sliding into this fascist dictatorship. But the others, they have to show its ability to recognize their role, even the passive role, in what's been happening now. It's about self-reflection, and that's why I think it's going back to what I said. Total isolation of Putin's Russia. It's one of the preconditions of helping Russia to be liberated from Putin's fascism.
You've mentioned Bucha and the images that came from there, also in Irpin, Borodyanka, what we see now in Mariupol at Azovstal, actually shocked the entire world. But besides Vladimir Putin, who you always named him as a war criminal, one of the first people to do so, and his generals, these horrible acts, the rapes, the killings, the tortures, were committed by actual individuals, but by soldiers, some of them very, very young. And I know you don't live in Russia anymore. You've been living your youth in the Soviet Union. We here in Romania, my generation heard a lot of stories from my grandparents about the Russian army coming to the country. And I'm asking you, can you understand what happens in the mind of these people, how they act? Why do they act like that?
Well, I cannot go...
It's a tradition. It's because I've interviewed lots of military personalities since the war started, and all of them said that these acts are unthinkable for a code of military honor. Why do the Russian armies, Soviet Union, Putin's army now, seem to find so easily to commit such acts?
Look, we know that during World War II, German army also committed crimes. So, and you can say it was a part of the German nature. So, unfortunately, dictators, they succeed by dehumanizing their people, by finding reasons, pointing at enemies, and also releasing the animal instincts. It's all people have some sort of dark side, and dictators, some great dictators. When I say great, it's evil also can be great. So they could be very successful in releasing this animal dark side in humans, whether it was Hitler or Stalin or Mao or Putin. You talked about these soldiers and the crimes they're committing, atrocities, and you said they were young. Absolutely, they're young. They grew up in Putin's Russia. That's all they know, it's Putin's Russia, where the value of human life was nothing. They could see that, any policeman could actually arrest you. You could be beaten. So this is the culture that they were fed with mother's milk. So that's why all these young soldiers, who are now 20, I mean, if they're 20 or 22, they were born under Putin. If they're 25 or even 30, they went to school when Putin was. So their whole life, it's in Putin's Russia. And again, remember, in Germany, there were only 12 years of Nazi rule. We have talked about 22 already, in a very, very steady propaganda that had been aimed at dehumanizing people. The second war in Chechnya that Putin started, it was in the year 2000. And when you look, you mentioned Mariupol. I can put images of Mariupol, but then next Grozny 2000 or Aleppo 2016, you may not identify them. This is the unbroken chain of crimes. And that's what these people, these young men learned. Many of them come from very poor regions, because Russia has one of the worst ratio of wealth inequality. So they were told that they could, attack Ukraine, they could, fight these bad guys, Nazis, and they could they can loot the country. So they never had any moral barriers to stop or some kind of moral rules that they learned in school or elsewhere to disobey these orders. So it's tragedy. It's absolute tragedy. It doesn't mean that the whole country is the same. We know that many soldiers, they refuse to go there. They try to actually escape. Ukrainians are publishing the conversations that they could tape, their communication with the Russians, because ironically they use, the mobile systems. So and you see this is growing frustration, misunderstanding of what's going on, and that's why there's only one solution. This war must be won decisively by Ukraine. The only way to end dictatorship is to have a military defeat, and that's why I'm rooting for Ukrainians. I'm trying to do whatever I can to help Ukrainians, because for me the liberation of Crimea, it's the beginning of liberation of Russia from Putin's fascism.
We only have 1 minute left, and I want to close quoting Anne Applebaum, who said about you that you are that rare thing, a Russian Democrat who is realistic about his country but remains hopeful for the future. So where do you see the hope now, the future?
I'm an incorrigible optimist by nature, but I believe that the Ukrainian war will offer my country, Russia, a chance. Ukrainian victory will give us an opportunity to start from square one, not to build a new state structure on the wrong foundation, but to go after Russian imperial past. The virus of imperialism must be eradicated for Russia to become a full member of the family of civilized nations.
Mr. Kasparov, thank you very much for this interview. Thank you for your audacity to always tell the truth.
Thank you for your understanding.
Vă mulțumesc, doamnelor și domnilor, și dumneavoastră că ne-ați urmărit. Rămâneți cu TVR, urmează telejurnalul. La revedere!